Guys, we are here. We are here. Ultimate Invasion #2. Man, this storyline is beautiful, y'all. Okay, so it does pick up where Ultimate Invasion #1 left off at. Now, with that being said, when it comes to Ultimate Invasion #1, we have to remember that the maker, Ultimate Reed Richards, went back in time to recreate the main Marvel universe into his own image. Now, we actually got a small sample of his work at the end of the last video, where we saw him find Peter Parker, and when he found Peter, he stopped the spider from actually biting Peter, which means that in this new timeline, there is no Spider-Man. And so just like that, he began to work into recreating the main Marvel universe into his own image. Now, we also have to remember that in the old timeline, when it came to the main Marvel universe, the heroes of the old timeline, they were trying to stop the maker from going back in time to do what he wanted to do. Unfortunately, they failed. But knowing Jonathan Hickman, those characters right there, they might come back at the end of the story to technically stop the maker at the end of Ultimate Invasion. Now, with that being said, this new timeline is up to the maker. He's able to do whatever he wants with this timeline. Well, not completely, because when it comes to Asgard, he couldn't access Asgard at first, which means that he couldn't prevent Thor from coming to life. Also because Thor is so old that by the time the maker has reached this timeline, or the point where heroes were going to rise up in this timeline, Thor was already alive and been around. And so technically, he couldn't change the idea of Thor being in this new universe. And so with that being said, Thor is still around. It's just Thor stays away from the Earth. And so we're then able to actually see more examples of his work. Starting off with Thor, we kind of see that Thor may have been captured. We have no idea, but we do know that Asgardians are not technically able to access Earth so easily thanks to the Bifrost being gone. Now, with the Bifrost being gone and Asgardians being dealt with, you then had the maker also deal with the Fantastic Four. Now remember, usually the Fantastic Four go into space and they come back with powers. Well, he made sure their space trip does not end the same way, and we're left to believe that the Fantastic Four are technically dead. But then we come to find out that with Stark, or Tony Stark, his father Howard Stark is still alive. And matter of fact, Howard Stark is working with Obadiah Stane, who is usually known as a bad guy to Tony Stark. But in New Timeline, Obadiah and Howard, they actually work together, and their companies have been combined into one, the Stane Stark Enterprises. That is just a few examples right there of this new timeline that the maker had made. Now, we do get some more examples of this new timeline. So for example, Bruce Banner, he's still the Hulk. Apparently the maker couldn't stop that from actually happening. Now, another thing that happened was, of course, Steve Rogers. Now, when it comes to Steve Rogers, apparently Steve Rogers is not at the location that he should have been at for the maker to find to hopefully stop Steve Rogers, which means that World War II had went differently in this timeline, which means that there could be a possibility Steve Rogers died in World War II, or he was frozen somewhere else. We have no idea. But then on top of that, we do see the maker bring back the concept of the city. Now, we saw the city back in Jonathan Hickman's run on the Ultimates in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. And when it comes to the city, it's this dome where inside the dome, time moves differently. So one day here could be a whole 1,000 years in there. And because time moves so fast inside the dome, the human race has evolved so much that technically they're really smart, but also they have powers possibly as well. They are a next step in evolution for the human race. But then we're able to actually explore this new world that the maker had made. And we actually pick up with Howard Stark. And the reason why, because we come to find out that Howard Stark is the new Iron Man of this universe, not Tony. Now, Tony is still around, but because Howard Stark is still around, not dead, Howard Stark is still in charge of the company. But on top of that, Howard Stark was the one to create the Iron Man suit. Now, right off the bat, if you look at that Iron Man suit, that actually is the Ultimate Marvel Iron Man suit. where to me is kind of like, okay, we're getting small hints of things from the Ultimate Marvel Universe that are popping up in this new timeline of the main Marvel Universe. Either way, in this new universe, Howard Stark is the new Iron Man of this universe. Now, later on, you're going to see who is the War Machine of this universe as well. Now, we jump into a conversation between Obadiah and Howard Stark. Now, when it comes to this conversation, it's really more of Obadiah trying to make sure that Howard Stark actually goes to this event. Now, we have no idea what this event is all about, but apparently Howard does not want to go. And the reason why, because the person in charge of the event, Howard does not like that person at all. But apparently Howard had already promised Obadiah that he would go. And so right now it's Obadiah making sure that when it comes to Howard, Howard keeps his promise. Now, we also learned that Howard was apparently able to cure cancer and any other kind of diseases out there in the world. And so just like that, this new timeline is technically better than the old timeline, because in this new timeline, there is no cancer. Something that Tony couldn't do in the old timeline. And so his father is doing a better job than he is in this new timeline. Now, on top of that as well, we do see Obadiah kind of concerned for Howard. And the reason why, because even though Howard was able to actually accomplish so many great things, Howard is not trying to be seen in the public. And that right there is a problem, because the public wants to see the man in charge in public. They want to have a face for the company. And Obadiah is a great guy and all, but Howard Stark was the one who cured cancer and have fixed a lot of different problems. And so he needs to be the face of the company. He needs to be seen in public. And so this event is the perfect idea of him being in the public. Either way, you do have Howard and Obadiah leave for this event. And that is the moment where we actually jump over to Latveria. Now, of course, you would think that maybe we're going to see Doctor Doom, but we don't see him at all in this section. And matter of fact, what we actually see is the city. And like I said earlier, when it comes to the city, it was a concept that the maker did back in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, that time moves differently inside the dome. And so because of that, the human race inside the dome, they have evolved to a new kind of evolution. Either way though, right now, the event is apparently some big, huge thing that is going to happen at the city. And so that is where we see all these different kind of characters arriving at this event. Now, with these different stars or different popular people, we're kind of able to learn a tad bit more about this timeline. So we do see Hulk, but apparently Hulk is very peaceful. Either way, he was invited to this event. Now, the next thing was the mutants. And of course, we still have mutants around, but apparently the mutants are not so hated on like they were originally in the old timeline. And matter of fact, it seems like some of the mutants rule different areas of the earth, like Colossus and Magic, they may rule Russia. On top of that, Sunfire and Silver Samurai, they also rule areas as well. So it's kind of say like, hey, mutants are technically not that much hated on in this new timeline like they were in the old one. And so again, this new timeline doesn't seem as bad as the old one. Now, you do have the Maker actually walk outside the city, but when he does walk outside the city, he looks up to the sky. Now, the reason why he does that, because he knows something is about to happen. And he says, well, I'm waiting. And that is the moment where we begin to see a wave of characters coming out of some portal. Now, these characters are technically different versions of Marvel heroes. So different versions of the Hulk, different versions of Captain America, different versions of the Wasp. Either way, they have arrived from the future and their goal is to attack the present day. And right now, they're going after anybody who is at this event. And so you do have some of the heroes of this new timeline try to jump in. Now, of course, you do have Obadiah ask Howard, did you bring your Iron Man suit? But of course, Howard did not, because in the past he was told to stop bringing around to different places. And of course, the one time he follows that direction is right now, where of course there's a huge attack happening. But luckily, Obadiah does have his suit. Obadiah is the war machine of this universe. And so you do have Obadiah get into his armored suit to help the other heroes fight against this attack from the future. Now, while he's trying to do that, unfortunately, Obadiah is being overrun, overpowered, and it actually leads into Obadiah Stane technically blowing up, but on top of that, that means he's dead, and Howard Stark is knocked out. And so then we pick up with Howard Stark actually waking up. Now, when he does wake up, he is confronted by the Maker. Now, when the Maker shows up in front of Howard Stark, you have the Maker tell Howard, okay, man, so got some bad news for you. Starting off with the idea that Obadiah Stane, yeah, he's dead. Sorry for your loss. But then you have the Maker say, oh, by the way, I was able to actually capture every single person that came from the future that was trying to attack us. Now you have Howard Stark ask why in the world they came back from the future to attack us for. And you have the Maker say, oh, they were trying to kill me. They wanted me dead. Now you then have the Maker say, oh, by the way, they also wanted you dead as well. Now for Howard Stark, the question is, what did he do down the road that is going to have people in the future actually hate him? But on top of that, what did the Maker do to have people in the future also hate him as well? Now, with that being said, though, that is the moment you have the Maker bring in a bunch of people. Now, these people come from the present day, but apparently these people are technically the ancestors of the future suicide bombers. And so what you have the Maker say that if I kill off their ancestors, then they die in the present day, because they need their ancestors to technically start the family line. But if they're dead, that family line is also dead. And so you have the Maker just go ahead and kill off these innocent people of the present day. And of course, the suicide bombers from the future, they also die just like that. Now, you have Howard Stark freak out even more. And the reason why, because Howard knows that if these guys came from the future, then that means that down the road, the future is going to try more extreme things to just remove him and the Maker as well. But for the Maker, he doesn't care, because to the Maker, he believes, because he's so smart, that he'll be ready for almost anything to come down the road. And so you then have the Maker actually take Howard Stark into another room, a laboratory. Now with this laboratory, of course, right off the bat, you have the Maker show Howard Stark that he had built some kind of time machine. And of course, we all know he did use that time machine as a way to travel between the past and present day, or the past and the future. Either way, with the time machine, he was able to actually recreate this new timeline. Now, at first, Howard Stark is not that concerned, but you didn't have the Maker say, I used this time machine to technically change this timeline, because the old timeline was not a good timeline. And in reality, he's correct, because in this new timeline, they were able to cure cancer and other kinds of diseases. Those right there are just a few examples of this timeline being better. But this is where you have Howard Stark get very concerned, because then you have the Maker say, oh, but I did have to move some different pieces around the timeline, existing pieces, meaning that Howard Stark was supposed to die. He was supposed to die in the original timeline, but because the Maker kept him alive and other things like that across the world, that you have Howard Stark realize this man had technically ruined the future. And that is why you have the future trying to come back in time to kill off Howard Stark, but to also kill off the Maker. Because thanks to the Maker moving around different pieces that should have been dead or destroyed, those pieces are now ruining the future timeline. But on top of that, though, you also have the Maker say that he believes Howard Stark was the one who built the time machine. and could actually fix the time machine. And we're left with that cliffhanger right there. So guys, with that being said, please leave me a like down below, subscribe to the channel. I cannot wait for Ultimate Invasion number 3 because I feel like it's gonna be amazing, y'all. But I'll see y'all next time. Later.